Greetings, everyone. This is Sweet Beats from Sweet Beats Tech Stop, shooting just a little impromptu video here of a Tascam M312 for an acquaintance of mine who's getting oriented to one. And so shooting some video to hopefully help give a visual overview of some of the features, just to get oriented to it. And again, this is impromptu, so shooting from the hip, and we're looking at a partially gutted M312, so you'll have to forgive the odd appearance of the console, but should help us out, even though it's missing some parts. So it's really helpful, I think, when trying to learn a mixer. Again, I always advise, if you have the block diagram, that's like a big pictogram that shows everything the mixer does. You can learn every thing a mixer does as far as what connects to what and how stuff routes and what functions and controls do what, just by looking at the block diagram. And the more you get familiar with reading them, the easier it will be, and it will be your best friend with any manual that comes with a mixing console, is that block diagram. So I encourage you to take some time and study them with the mixer in front of you and with the manual also. When you come across something that doesn't quite make sense, well, then look it up in the manual and read the instructions for what that function does, or how that feature routes or is assigned or whatever. It'll help you get acclimated to block diagrams in general. So anyway, so look at the block diagram. But the other thing that I think is helpful when you're learning a mixer is just to never lose sight of the fact that at its basic sense, all a mixing console is a collection of inputs and a collection of outputs. And inputs can be routed or assigned to different outputs. And those different outputs have different functions and features. And the other main thing a mixer does, aside from being a collection of inputs that can be assigned or routed to outputs, is it does level matching. It takes low-level signals like microphones and boosts them to line level, to get the signal level above the noise floor. It can take really loud signals, hot signals, and pad them so that they're not too hot or not too loud for the circuitry. Oftentimes it can take unbalanced signals and balance them, and vice versa. So it does that sort of thing too. Takes different types of signals and converts them to a common type of signal for the sake of the mixer to be able to do its work. And of course, most mixing consoles also do some sound shaping. You know, your EQ section to shape your sound. And this particular mixer doesn't do this, but of course lots of mixers also have onboard effects. Some have dynamics processors, compressors, and such to otherwise shape or control the sound also. But at its basic sense, it's a collection of inputs that can be creatively routed to a collection of outputs. So some of the things that, some of the questions that my acquaintance was asking, in particular, had to do with line inputs, mic inputs, tape returns. And so on the M312, there are 12 mixer channels. There's 12 strips that are all basically identical. And each one of those has a microphone input. This is the M312, not the 312B, so I have no phantom power on this. The 312B has phantom power, but this works for dynamic microphones. The 312B with phantom power will also power condenser mics. But this is a microphone input. It's designed to boost the very low level signals that come from a microphone. The line input, that's an unbalanced line input that's designed for handling line level signal. There's a direct out that comes after the fader, and then you have an insert point that's directly after the head amp. So each one of those 12 mixer channels have those same features, and each of those 12 mixer channels can have, on the M312 or on the M300 series, they have independent control of the trim level for that line input or that mic input. The mic input is up top, the line input is the bottom of the stacked pot. And normally the microphone jack is the input that is the source of the channel strip. If you want to instead monitor the line input, then you hit the line button. So you've got a switchable source between the mic or the line input, and you have independent trim controls for those two independent inputs. You also have a 30 dB pad. This is on the mic input. It simply switches in a set of resistors that attenuate the input signal. So if needed, you can connect balanced line level signals to the mic amp. And line level audio would be way too loud, much too hot for the input of the mic amp. So that's why you have to switch in this 30 dB pad. It makes that line level signal really quiet, and then the mic amp boosts that up to line level into the mixer. So yeah, it's really only if you're using the mic inputs for balanced line level signals, I would really only do that as a stopgap measure in a pinch if that's something that you needed to do temporarily, but not necessarily the best practice to do ongoing. On the 312B, it has phantom power. Heaven forbid you turn on the phantom power or have phantom power enabled when you plug in your line level source. You're going to cook the output of that line level device. And then you are also, if you're following me, line level is a relatively hot signal compared to microphone level. So why would we take that already hot signal and squash it down really quiet and then boost it up again? You're sending that signal through a whole bunch of circuitry it doesn't need to go through. So anyway, so we've got two possible sources for each mixer channel strip. We've got some sound shaping here with the EQ, and then we have here's our first set of outputs from each mixer channel. We have two auxiliary buses and an effect bus. So you take your input signal and then you can submix that to the auxiliary buses or effect bus. And on the M300 series, it's nice. You have a line switch on the aux1 bus. That makes it so that regardless of how you have the source set for the channel strip, whether you have it sourcing the mic input or the line input, you can independently source whatever's connected to that line input jack on the back of the mixer in the aux1 bus. So why would you want to do that? Well, typically this is used for if you have your tape machine or recorder, digital recorder. If you have those outputs connected to line inputs on the mixer, this is how, when you're overdubbing, you can source. Let's say you have, one of the outputs from your recorder connected here. You're overdubbing and you want your drummer to be able to hear that, the playback of that track. You can source the track here, adjust the level, and then maybe you have the aux1 bus connected to a headphone amp, and that's driving a set of headphones on the drummer's head. So that's what that's for. This is inline monitoring. You have a separate monitoring function in line with the channel strip. The aux2 bus can source from either pre or post fader, and then you have your effect bus. So that's your first set of outputs from this input. And then we come to the next set of outputs. We have our submix buses or subgroups, program groups. They're called a number of different things, but in the basic sense, it's a set of outputs that you can mix multiple inputs to. And the M300 series has 4 mix buses, 1, 2, 3, 4. It also has a stereo bus, the main bus, left, right. So each input, each channel strip has 2 possible inputs, independent inputs, and how many outputs? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then technically 8, 9 with the stereo bus. And then we have actually one more output. We have the solo bus, the pre-fade listen. That is a 10th possible output from each channel strip. So the next thing that I want to talk a little about is the monitor mixer. Pardon the fact that there is a bus card that's missing here, a bus master card. So here are the 4 mix buses, these 4 strips here. So when you assign an input on, in this case, channel 12, when you assign that to mix bus 1, it is going to go to this fader, and then you can do a number of things with that. If you raise that up, it's now going to be present on the bus 1 output, either balanced or we have a parallel pair of unbalanced RCA outs. We also have an insert jack on that. That's a nice feature. So that's one place that the mix bus can go, is straight to that output. You can also route or assign your mix buses to your stereo main bus, and I'll explain in a minute why that's handy. But you do that by using the monitor mixer. So if you want to monitor this mix bus, all signals from all mixer channels that are assigned to, in this case, mix bus 1, you would turn the monitor mixer channel on, and this pan control assigns it to the left side of the main bus or the right side of the main bus or anything in between, and then you have a level control. And that's it. Now, because I've turned up the level and it's panned center, mix bus 1 is going equally to the left and right main bus. We also have a after fade listen. That's a solo function, so we can check out what's happening on mix bus 1 over in the solo bus. We also have on the M312 and 320, the M308 doesn't have this, but the 312 and the 320 do. We have in 3rd and 4th auxiliary buses. So that's nice. You have another set of feeds, like a matrix mixer, off of your program groups, and the source of the aux bus can be pre or post fader. So you see we've got 8, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 monitor mixer channels. Monitor mixer channels 1 and 5, their source is mix bus 1, or we have these tape return jacks. So the M300 series, in addition to one line level input for each of the mixer channels, has another set of 8 line level inputs on the back here, the tape in jacks. 1, 2, 3, 4 is there, it's just not there. 5, 6, 7, 8. These were originally intended for the outputs of a tape machine, up to an 8-track tape machine. You would connect the outputs of that tape machine here, and then you could access these line level inputs either by sourcing a monitor mixer channel to that input. So for instance, monitor mixer channel 1, when the tape return switch is in the up position, is sourcing mix bus 1. But now if I latch the tape return button on monitor mixer channel 1, this monitor mixer channel is now listening to or monitoring or sourcing the line level input for tape in 1. And we can do all the same things now with that line level source as we could when we were sourcing the mix bus here when I gave that example with monitor mixer channel 5. We can send it to the aux3 bus, so we have an input and we have an output, and we can also dump that over to the stereo bus. We turn it on, we pan to taste, set level to taste, and now we've got that tape input over here on the main bus. So we've got the possibility to set up a monitor mix of all 8 tape returns with the tape return source switches. If you have a 4-track machine, you might use tape returns 1 through 4. You can set up a monitor mix of the tape machine outputs there, and then you've got 4 monitor mixer channels remaining that you could set up a submix of your 4 mix buses over to your left-right bus. We keep talking about moving things over to this left-right bus. So the source of the left-right main bus is your monitor mixer, and or you can directly assign each mixer channel to the left-right bus. So a couple of examples of why you have this. In a typical live sound reinforcement setting where you've got a mixer in a front of house setup, you would normally have your mics or line sources. You would mix with your faders, you would dump each one over to the main bus, and that would go to your PA system. The M300 series is really neat. It does a great job of doing double duty, either front of house or recording, because it also has a mono sum of the left-right bus. So this is real handy for live sound reinforcement. So this is just a mono sum of the left-right bus. So live work, that's normally how it would go. Or sometimes you would use your mix buses to submix the drums, say, so that you can have the drums on one fader, something like that, and then you would dump that over to here and over to here. But in recording, oftentimes we are assigning inputs to mix buses, and with multi-tracking, oftentimes, you know, you're gonna have maybe, like in a typical 4-track setup, you might have 3 or more mics on the drums, and you're submixing that to mix buses. So maybe you're using mix bus 1 and mix bus 2, and so your drums are here, and then that goes out to your tape machine. You would use your mix bus outputs, which are here, the program outputs. So those will go to your tape machine. Okay, here is the other really important thing, because we've got different stages to the recording process, right? You've got tracking, you've got overdubbing, and then you've got mixdown. So during initial tracking, you've got inputs, you're assigning those to outputs, that's going to your tape machine, and you record away. Now it's time to lay down a couple of more tracks to material you've already recorded. So you have your tape machine outputs connected to your tape in jacks. And remember, I said earlier, you've got this line source button on the mixer channels on the aux1 bus where you can source the line input. Well, how does that correlate to your tape return jacks? On the M300 series, these tape in jacks, like we've already talked about, you can source those in your monitor mixer, but these jacks are also normaled. Okay, these 8 line level inputs are normaled to the mixer channels 1 through 8 line input jacks. When I say normaled, what that means, kind of like a patch bay, you plug your tape machine track 1 output to tape in 1, and that is automatically connected over here to the line in jack internally inside the line in jack for mixer channel 1. If you plug something into this line input jack, it physically separates contacts. Okay, so you plug in here, and there's internal wiring that goes to a contact inside this jack that automatically connects that with the signal connector in there. When you plug a TS 1/4 inch phone plug into this with your keyboard or whatever it is, it physically breaks that contact. So now this is only accessible in your monitor mixer. But what that means is that you can have your tape machine outputs connected here, and then over on the mixer for mixer channels 1 through 8, when you press the line source button here, so when you source this mixer channel to the line input, if you don't have anything plugged into that 1/4 inch TS jack on the jack panel on the back, if you don't have anything plugged in there, but you have something plugged into the tape in jack number 1, when you source the line input, that is going to source your tape in jack 1. Same goes for the line source switch for the aux1 bus on mixer channel 1. That is going to source your tape in jack 1. Again, as long as you don't have anything plugged in here, because when you plug that in, it breaks that signal. And then when you unplug it, that signal is then normaled back to this jack. So that's a really convenient feature, because what that means is, let's say you only have 4 line sources that you're normally working with. If you connected those line level sources to mixer channels 9 through 10 and had just microphones connected here to channels 1 through 8, you can have your tape machine outputs to the tape in jacks. And then when it's time for mix down, you are all ready to rock right here. You just source these channels to line, shape, mix, do your thing. Ready to go. So that's how that's supposed to work. And then when you're overdubbing, well, or when you're tracking, or when you're overdubbing, when you're mixing down, if you are using an M300 mixer in a recording situation, this main stereo bus is really your bus as the engineer. You can get a submix with the monitor mixer of your program groups that you're mixing and assigning your inputs to for your tape machine inputs. You can get a submix of tape machine returns independent of what's going on over here. And then during mix down, when you've got your mixer channels sourced to your tape machine outputs, in that situation you would have those channels sourced to line, and then you would have those assigned or routed directly to the left-right bus. And we've got this section here called monitor. That's you. And the monitor bus has this whole switch rack for what the source of the monitor bus is. And look, the very first one is stereo, because it's probably the most critical to you as the operator of the mixing console. So that's, in a recording situation, that's how you're using the left-right bus, and that's why this monitor mixer, why the outputs of each of those 8 monitor mixer channels, whether their source is the mix buses or the tape returns, their output is the left-right bus. And then you select that here and monitor that. We also have 2 sets of stereo line level inputs. These might be connected to stereo recorders, master recorders, that you can quickly monitor the output and not disturb anything else down here. And then we can also monitor the effect bus, and we can independently monitor each of the aux buses. So those are not all of, but a lot of the features of the M300 series mixers from Tascam. Hopefully this has been helpful, and we'll see you next time.